It was announced this morning that Judge Aileen Cannon has set a date for next May 20th, 2024, for the documents trial. She definitely extended it quite a bit from the proposed December date, the date that the prosecution, led by Jack Smith, had been proposing. This is adding almost 5 months. Question is, how does this line up with Trump's chart? Now, here we see the date itself and the planets on that date. Now we put them in relationship to the chart of the orange Menace, and so we get this graphic, and we can see that there's a lot of activity going on. And you'll recall from my conversation with astrologer Patrick Watson a while back, the discussion around the merits of the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction that is due to happen April 20th. I'm showing that here with these two little green boxes, and the notion that this could be very helpful to Trump. In Patrick's opinion, it could, for example, correlate with a judge helping him out, giving him a break, since these planets are transiting up above in the chart, zenith, midheaven, and the idea of authorities helping you out through the benevolent power of Jupiter. And so one could perhaps surmise that in April she could throw the whole case out, or perhaps in April, around the conjunction, extend the date further beyond the election. All of that is possible. However, we do have to look around to what's going on with all the other planets as well, and keeping in mind that the Jupiter conjunction happens with both planets moving forward, and Uranus moves to a station later that year, but gets away from those degrees fairly far, and Jupiter leaves completely. In other words, this is not a stationary conjunction, which would have made it a lot more powerful. As it is, it's what I like to refer as a flyby conjunction, and that, to my mind, diminishes the power considerably. And when I look at the surrounding energies, in pointing to May 20th, it looks pretty dicey, to put it mildly, because you have, interestingly, just even on the day, if you are looking for the symbolism of something beginning on a certain date and what it might mean, it's curious to see the moon at noon on that day. And of course, the trial could start earlier, but at noon it's 26 degrees. If you look at it at 9 a.m., it would be 24 degrees. It's in that range, and that is a direct hit by square to his Saturn Venus, especially the Venus, which I do not interpret in a positive way at all, both because the moon rules the 12th and Venus is in the 12th, and what is being transacted definitely relates to criminality, which is what you place in the 12th. It is true, as Patrick put it, that the moon being eclipsed at birth could signify in anything it's doing the eclipsing of his enemies. However, that's not a point I would take too far in this kind of alignment. I would think this moon at that point is quite negative, and it's my experience in watching Trump over the years that he struggles when the moon is in the degrees of Libra, as well as the degrees of Aries, Cancer, and Capricorn, when this area is being triggered. And then when we look at the other planets, we notice the sun just entering Gemini, definitely highlighting the notoriety of the whole thing. This is further emphasized by Venus, Uranus, Jupiter, a cluster of planets up above here as this is happening. And yet, it's not a particularly good event, since it's a trial. And this is where I read it as notoriety / infamy more than I read it as something positive. Although, again, we could perhaps, we're being very, very optimistic, we would say, since Venus and Jupiter are elevated, he's going to get a break from authority figures. Look around, though, and what you see Saturn around that time heading toward a station in early July at 19.5 degrees, thereby definitely linking it in a square to his Uranus, and already being in a station within range of his moon and sun in a square. Meanwhile, the Uranus transit, it takes it May 20th at 23 degrees. It's almost at his midheaven, and then crosses right through the midheaven and goes beyond to the 27th degree, which puts it in a square to his Mars. I cannot interpret that as a positive transit. To my mind, that is a very challenging situation to have Uranus in that part of the chart. Then if we look at Pluto, we see it in early Aquarius. And early Aquarius means specifically the second degree projected forward. And what that does is it puts it 45 degrees from 2 degrees, puts it at 17 degrees Pisces, which means the 17th degree mutable throughout the chart is being stressed by semi-square, sesqui-square, meaning 2 degrees Aquarius is a sesqui-square, 135 degrees to Uranus. That isn't helpful at all. And if you look at where Pluto has been before in 24 and where it's going, it heads back to the late Capricorn degrees, which put it at 150 to the ascendant. And that is also unhelpful. And that, in fact, is why I have this Neptune highlighted as well, because the whole year it is either in 150 to Mars or in 150 to the ascendant. These are unhelpful aspects. At minimum, they're very maladjusted. Things don't work. It's a constant state of tension. And there is the health concern when you have Pluto and Neptune in this kind of pattern, because not only are they in 150, which is a notorious health angle, but they're also in the very houses where you least would want them to be, the 6th and the 8th, sending that energy through that angle. And then, of course, there's the Eris, which I've spoken about at length in the past, parked at 25 degrees Aries for years, attacking that Venus from the legal house, which is a major threat. You can even see, not that I use Chiron a whole lot in transit, I see Chiron as something that I would add as an add-on, something that contributes to the situation. But it's not contributing very well, because around this time, it's also in a square to his Saturn in Aries. In fact, it makes a station in late July in a direct square. And for those that follow the transiting nodes, which I will admit are not always reliable in the way they reflect situations via their transit, and yet it's amazing to see the North Node moving into Aries degrees that are extremely problematic for this guy, because as we move forward from that date, what it does is it links to the infamous axis Hollywood T-square formed by Mercury, Neptune, and Eris, an area that I can tell you for a fact 100% he does not like at all. Now, you could say perhaps the Jupiter here entering Gemini is the savior. And this is where you have to assess the Jupiter at birth. And he does have a very strong Jupiter, stationary at birth. It sextiles the moon, trines the sun. No question it's a strong planet. However, it also squares the 12th sign writ large, in that if you coalesce these 3 planets in Cancer, you get an energy at around 19.5 degrees Cancer. And if you consider midpoints of Saturn and Mercury, as well as Venus and Mercury, you're in the 17 degree range, 16.5. The Sun-Pluto midpoint goes in there as well. So this Jupiter is squaring energy in the 12th house. That makes it a problematic planet in that sense. And we have to keep in mind what the context of the situation is. The situation is that he is under tremendous stress from multiple indictments. Of course, this is now. When we're looking in 2024, we're considering one such case. We don't know yet if and when Jack Smith will charge the January 6th insurrection issue, as well as the Fonnie Willis Georgia matter. They're likely to be there as well, however. And in any case, we notice that this Jupiter, being in his sign, is also carrying these problems. And so then back again to the notion, is the planet up there in his sign transiting through there saving him? Or is it contributing to the problem through highlighting where he is and correlating more to infamy than to fame and fortune? This, by the way, is something I've noticed about Trump. Trump's only Jupiter transit that I've seen to be pretty much all upside was when Jupiter was in Libra back here in 2016, making the trine to his sun, especially at inauguration. It was in a stationary trine, and that was the one positive effect. When Jupiter went through Sagittarius, which you might consider to be quite positive since it's in his moon sign, was when he was beginning to connect with Bill Barr, and in due time he then became overconfident as a result of feeling that he had overcome the Mueller problem, and he immediately tried to extort Ukraine, and things downtrended badly from that point. So what I'm getting at is that when Jupiter goes through his sign, as it does here, it also opposes his moon. And so the general approach he takes when Jupiter is around in an intense way is he tends to overreach, he exaggerates, and the bottom line is things do not go well. So when I'm looking at this whole panorama, I do not see how this trial date is anything positive for Trump. I will leave the opening that perhaps in here he gets some kind of assistance. Do I think that's possible? Yes. Do I think it's likely? No, I don't. I also think that there are going to be other trials as well. Eileen Cannon is one of these trials, but the other trials will have an effect as well. And furthermore, I do not see how, in the midst of the campaign, by the time we get into the spring of 2024, we're really in the thick of it. I don't see how this is good. That might be why Eileen Cannon says, well, let's delay it because it's too much and so forth. But, there will be arguments about that as well. All of it, in a sense, though, has to be looked at extremely problematic, given that he is seeking to win the nomination at that time. We think, because remember, all of this is pretty heavy projection. Separately, I've said that 2023 is looking extremely problematic as well, especially the 60 days that we're in right now, taking us into the fall for different reasons. They relate to the Venus cycle and to the fact that his ascendant is changing from Libra to Scorpio, having been in Libra since the mid-80s. These types of switches with the ascendant are extremely rare. So, in other words, much is going to happen prior to reaching this date, and I think it'll condition the kinds of things that may happen on this date. But bottom line, if I am summarizing and concluding, I say thumbs down.